Good evening and welcome to this webinar on how to score 760 on the GMAT. My name is Rajat Sidana. I am one of the co-founders of e-GMAT and I welcome you into 2020. It's the first webinar that we're hosting in the year 2020 and I'm very excited to host that. Along with me, supporting me in this webinar is Manas. Manas is a GMAT strategy expert. He's also our head of sales and he's going to make sure that every question that you have that I don't get to gets responded to through him. The purpose of this webinar is to help you create a study plan or rather help you visualize your journey towards that 730, 740, 760 score, whatever your target score is. And we plan to achieve three things in this webinar. One, we want to make sure that each one of you understands how to create your personalized study plan. The second thing we want to tell you is we want to make sure that you understand what the GMAT actually tests, because even when you have a study plan, you need to be able to study properly, and to do that, you need to know what GMAT actually tests. And the third thing that I want to achieve is to help you understand what it means to studying properly, which means how can you, as you're putting in that effort, how can you evaluate whether you're actually moving towards that goal of that 730, 740, 750 score. We will solve a couple of sentence correction questions in this webinar. We'll have Payal who'd come in the second part of this webinar to help you solve those questions. And then to make sure that you're able to solve those questions, let's send a couple of video lessons your way. The video lessons on verb ED modifiers and verb ing modifiers are the ones that we're going to apply in this webinar, but there are these other video lessons on word face, on main point and reading comprehension, a few ones in number properties and GMAT algebra that are available to you as a part of our free trial. If you haven't gone through them, I'd recommend you go through them. It will tell you the quality that we offer. Also, if you're interested in a particular subject matter, we have a couple of upcoming webinars. We have a free quant workshop, which is tomorrow. Manas actually would be hosting that that workshop. Think of this quant workshop as a proctored mock test in which we tell you what your current quant score is, and then we help you create a quant-specific study plan towards your target quant score. We also tell you what are the things that are pulling your quant score back. It's not just limited to, let's say, number properties or algebra, but essentially what behaviors, such as not being able to infer information, such as not applying the constraints properly, and so on and so forth, that we focus on based on how you perform in this particular workshop. So definitely probably the most comprehensive quant diagnostic that you can give. This is what that workshop amounts to. Then next week we have a webinar on, next week we have a webinar on GMAT sentence correction. In this webinar, we talk about the famous meaning-based approach that e-GMAT pioneered. And the host of this webinar is Pari Tandon, who actually invented the meaning-based approach on GMAT sentence correction. That's next Saturday on 11th of September. With that, this is a free webinar. It's actually quite heavily attended. And to make sure that we do justice to this group as a whole, we ask a few leading questions. One of them is, when do you plan to take the test? The next is, hey, what's your current GMAT score? If you've not responded to either one of these questions, I'd recommend that you do so. That it allows us to understand the profile of this entire group as a whole. I have about 150 students over here, and this definitely helps me understand where you're coming from, where you currently are at, and then of course where you intend to go. And that would be our next question, which is, what is your target GMAT score? We actually reduce the size of my webcam. That way we have the polls neatly organized. All right, with regards to when do people plan to take the test, about 45%, the biggest group over there, have not taken a date as of yet. The next biggest group actually is a very nice increasing horizontal bar graph in many ways. So we have a few folks who have their exam right away, very similar number in 16 to 30 days. Again, slightly more in a month to 45 days, and then about 24% of you have more than 45 days before the GMAT, and about 45% of you haven't taken a date as of yet. All right, with regards to the current GMAT scores, and I have about 160 students, I'd appreciate if I get a few more responses here. With regards to this, about 35% of you don't know your GMAT score as of yet. If you don't know that, where you currently stand, I recommend you take a Sigma X mock, and Manas, as we get into the Q&A pod, be helpful if you can share the link to Sigma X mock. And then with regards to current GMAT score, those of you who know about your current GMAT score, the biggest group is in the 560 to 600 bracket, but overall fairly even distribution. And with regards to the target GMAT score, what I see is about 66% of you are aiming for a score of 730 or higher, which in my opinion, if you're aiming for top business schools, is a score that you should aim for, especially top B schools in the US. Okay, with that, let's go right into the webinar pane. What you will see as we go there, two things. One is you're going to really see the screen will have changed for you. And the second thing is you'll see a presentation pod along with a question and answer pod over there. I'm going to give you about another 5 to 7 seconds so that the screen does settle down for you guys. So let's just take another 5 to 7 seconds overall, and then we'll restart proceedings. All right, so the screen should have settled down for pretty much everyone over here. You should see a presentation which says how do you score in the 95th percentile or better on the GMAT, and then you should see a Q&A pod. During this webinar, if you have a question, feel free to post that in the Q&A pod, and Manas or I would be happy to respond to that. Okay, so earlier on I asked this question, what's your target GMAT score? And about 65% of you said it's 730 or higher. And getting to that score is hard, and I want to make sure that I provide you guys some extra motivation as to why should you get to that score of 730 or higher. Why? Because getting to that score will require that you put in those additional sacrifices. That it'll take a certain amount of grit and determination on your part. So at a very high level, if you don't remember anything, that you just should remember that a score of 730 or higher today gives you an ROI of about $500,000 over a 10-year period. Why do I say that? Why? Because hey, top B schools now, and when I say now, it's today. It wasn't the case in the year 2014. Top B schools now require a score of 730 or higher. The second piece is more than half the scholarships that B schools provide go to students who get to that score. Okay, so B schools in the US give about $300 million worth of scholarships. B schools in Europe give another $55 million worth of scholarships. And if you look at Asia Pacific, there's another 20 odd million. So, but out of the 200,000 students who actually, for whom these scholarships are embarked, the top 5,000 get half of that money. And when you think about the earning potential, or what we call as a pay premium when it comes to top business schools, so that pay premium over the past 3 years from top B schools is the highest it has ever been till date. And this is very different from what it used to be when I did my MBA, where the pay premium wasn't as high, when the delta in scholarships wasn't as high. Now these numbers, there's a very clear distinction between what top B schools offer and what B schools ranked 25th or higher offer today, and the pay premium that you get. Some of you are saying, can you share more data? Can you be a bit more specific with regards to what you mean? And let me just do that. But at a very high level, if you are aiming for that score of 700, if you want to get to a score, if you can get to a score of 730 or higher, that's $500,000 of money that you'd get in your pocket. That's just the value of that score. Okay, so we're going to tackle each one of these points one by one. And the first one is top B schools now require those high GMAT scores. Here is some data over here. And what you see over here is median scores, a table which shows median scores that are at top B schools in the year 2014, and the median scores in the year 2018, which is when the last representative data set was here. Okay. Now, What you see is, first of all, you won't see Harvard and Stanford over here. Why? Because for Harvard and Stanford, the scores are already in the 730s when we look at in the year 2014. The second thing, at top schools such as Kellogg, MIT, Yale, or Columbia, these school median scores have been going up. In fact, at MIT and Columbia, more than 80% of the incoming class has a score of 700 or higher, which means what these schools are telling you is if you don't have a score of 700, don't even bother applying. Okay. Now, if you see the trend for 23 out of the top 25 schools, median scores have gone up during these in this 5-year span. The 24th school, the median score remained the same. The 25th school was the only school where the median score went down by 2 points. Okay, and this is despite the fact that in the year 2014 there were 250,000 GMAT test takers. In the year 2018 there were about 200,000 GMAT test takers as per our estimates, and despite fewer test takers, these schools have become more selective. It just tells you how they're thinking. And here's a quote who's from Mike Either, who's the managing director at Poets and Quants. He says, the bottom line remains that only the best of the best have a shot at getting into any of these schools. And then the schools that are listed are the ones in the top 25. And this trend is not only limited to the top 25. We see just an upward trend overall. Here are schools ranked between 26th and 30th. And what you see is the 5-year median score change over here. Now, not all of them are in that 730 range, but a few of them are. And in this table, you see schools which have had the highest 5-year median score increase. And you'd see Kellogg and Ross are probably the two schools on the top 25 that are here. But other than that, the other 4 schools that you see in this table are not in the top 25. Okay. Now, this was some statistical data. Now I'm going to show you some anecdotal data from our students. Now, e-GMAT, we've had about 40,000 students in the past 5 years or so. And we get a lot of scholarship data. A typical year, our students get about $25 million worth of fellowships and scholarships overall. So, as an example of one of our students, his name is Nishant. He had a score of 690. He was rejected by Tuck, Penn State, Broad, and Rotman. And when you look at these colleges, Penn State and Broad are not as selective as Tuck and Rotman, but he was still rejected with that score of 690. He improved his score to 740. He got a full fellowship from Ohio Fisher. He got an admit from Columbia. And the thing which was there was when he applied to Tuck and when he was rejected by Tuck, the reason that was given to him was that, hey, we like your profile is great, but your GMAT score is not up to standards. Here's another case of one of our other students. Her name is Pravi. She scored a 680. She applied to 5 schools with a 680. Then she took the GMAT again, and this was during round 2. Then she took the GMAT again, and she improved her score to 740. And this was the last day of receiving interview invites from many schools. She applied to these schools and updated her GMAT score. And within 5 hours of updating her GMAT score, she received 4 interview invites. She got an 80,000 scholarship from Georgetown, 40,000 from UCLA Anderson, and as well as an admit from Kellogg. Now, I can assume that one of that could be a coincidence, but not 5. The case of Krishnakant is just one story which talks about the importance of GMAT score. Scored a 680, applied to Simon, Foster, Rotman, and McGill, got rejected from each and every school. This was R2. So in R2, he got rejections from every school. Then he scored a 720 in R3, round 3, when students don't typically receive admits. He got full fellowships from Georgia Tech, WP Carey, and Texas A&M. 3 full fellowships in round 3. He's currently studying at Georgia Tech. And if you think about a turnaround of fortune, 680 all rejects, 720 all full fellowships. That is something that just tells you the importance. Now, What this tells you is when it comes to your GMAT score, it's way more important than it has ever been overall. So let's go to the next piece over here, which is more than 50% of the scholarships that are kept aside for incoming class. That actually goes to students who get a score of 730 or higher. Just some statistical data over here. So 350 million is about our estimated amount of scholarship money that these schools give out. And based on our estimates, and we get lots and lots of stats, but 55% is distributed to about 6,000 students who get to 740 or higher, and about 80% of that money goes to about 20,000 students who get to a score of 710 or higher. And these are our estimates, but I can tell you our estimates come from an experience of about 40,000 students who've been through the e-GMAT curriculum, who've reported their scores, their scholarship amounts to us. If you go to our YouTube channel, you're going to really see 10 times as many success stories that as you'd see anywhere, and probably 15 to 20 times as much scholarship money awarded to those. So if you get a score of 740 or higher, my estimate is that you get a scholarship amount of at least $40,000 if you choose your schools appropriately. And factors that determine how much scholarship money you get. One is your GMAT score. The second is how much they'll like you during the interview. And this is based on my personal discussions with B school officers, with directors, admission directors at top B schools. I do visit various business schools during the various conferences that we have during the year. So two factors that determine your scholarship. It's not your application. It's not your letter of recommendation. But one, your GMAT score. Second, how much do they like you during the interview? Okay, so that was statistical data. Here's anecdotal data over here. One of our former students, Mansi, she got a 770. She got $90,000 scholarship from Harvard. She got actually admits into Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Kellogg, as well as INSEAD. She's currently studying at Harvard. If you click on the YouTube link, you can watch her interview. One of our other students, Victor, he got a 142,000 scholarship from Ross as well as Keenan Flagler. He also scored a 770. And then Kong Bui, he was a very interesting case, 760 on the GMAT. He got 4 full fellowships. He just graduated from Ohio Fisher. He's working in the US over here right now. But he just didn't get a full scholarship. He also got a living allowance. So this guy was paid $1,700 a month to study at Ohio Fisher. Okay. And then a few of these you've already seen case studies. You've seen Nishant's, Pravi's, as well as Krishnakant's. We talked about this earlier. Has a very interesting case, something that was reported to us about 3 months back or so. So Ayush scored a 710, applied to various business schools with a score of 710, and he didn't get an admit anywhere. In fact, he was waitlisted by Ross. And he was shocked with this because his interview went really well. Everyone at the school liked him. So he reached out to the business school and said, hey, what happened? It seems you guys really liked me. I was hoping to get an admit. And the school told him, he said, hey, we told you we need a higher GMAT score for an Indian. It's a score of 710 just doesn't cut it. So then within round 2, so the round 2 decisions were just out. Round 3 had not started by then. He improved his score from 710 to 750, and he didn't even apply. He just reported his score. He didn't apply again, and the same school that waitlisted him, Ross, gave him a scholarship. He also received an admit from Columbia at a 750 along with a scholarship. He's currently studying at Columbia. So I mean, here's an example of a school that waitlisted a student, the same student with a higher GMAT score got a scholarship. If you want to do a differential analysis, there's no better differential analysis that you would get. Okay. And as a quote from John Fuller, he says, he's a former admissions director at Ross, he says, someone with a 770 is much more likely to get a financial award than someone with a 670. It can be much more likely for that business school to want to buy that high GMAT score. The third point, probably the most ignored point that's there is the what I call as a delta in 10-year total earnings. And then this delta, which we call as the education premium, or the top B school premium, is the highest it has ever been. And the reason why I say it's the highest it has ever been is because I've experienced this myself, and this wasn't as high when I did my MBA, as I mentioned earlier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare two schools. I'm going to compare Babson, which is the world's highest rated program in entrepreneurship. It's a school that I went to, and I'm going to compare MIT Sloan. Now, 10 years ago, I had an option of going to Babson or going to a top B school in Chicago. And I chose Babson. Why? Because it offered me a full fellowship overall. And the wage differential at that point wasn't very high. So, and the reason I chose Babson and MIT is because Babson and MIT, both of them are based in Boston. Both of them, if you the opportunities that you get at MIT, the students at Babson are exposed to those opportunities. Yes, it's harder for them to get to those, but they're exposed, they're available. Those opportunities are available to these students. So students who go to Babson and students who go to MIT face the same cost of living, have the same opportunities or similar opportunities to or post their MBA. Now, when you think about the median-based salaries, and these are stats reported by both of these schools, at Babson, the median starting salary is $96,000. From MIT, it's about $135,000. The average starting bonus at Babson is $10,000, whereas MIT, you can really see the same thing. When you think about the total first-year compensation, you'd see a delta of about $50,000 over there. If you take that delta, let's take the delta to be about $45,000. Let's assume that delta remains constant over a 10-year period. You'd really just see about $450,000 over here. Now, I said this number has the highest that it has ever been. Why? Because when I was studying at Babson, the average starting salary at Babson over here was, let me just draw this. The average starting salary, this number was $90,000 in the year 2006, which is when I graduated. This number over here was about $112,000. And you can really see that 90,000 has increased to 96,000, that 112 has gone up to $135,000. And the concept of signing bonuses, I mean, they weren't as big at either schools. So again, 3 reasons why you should aim for that score of 730 or higher. 1, top B schools now require that high score. The second, scholarships. This is something that you get right away. And trust me, after you've received an admit, if you have a full fellowship, you don't have to worry about securing a loan. Life is a lot better. I've experienced it myself, and it's just probably the best investment you can make in your GMAT preparation. And the third is the premium that you pay, the wage premium that you get for studying at a top B school is the highest that it has ever been. And for those of you who are worried about H1B, if you look at top graduates from top B schools, what you're going to find is they don't have as many issues. In fact, they don't have very many issues when it comes to getting a job. 98% of graduates from top B schools get a job within 3 months of graduating, if not before. I had a question. Pravan says, would you have a comparable pattern of scores for leading these schools in India? So IIMs, I've not heard of them offering scholarships unless and until you actually are from a defense background or something, which is when your employer offers you a scholarship. ISB has a few scholarships. It offers scholarships to about 7% of its incoming class. We have an article on our website. Again, your GMAT score, the uniqueness of your background, defines whether you get a scholarship. It also looks at needs. Now, a lot of the ISB scholarship money is actually reserved for expats. So if you are someone who's working outside of India and you come back and study there, you're much more likely to get scholarships from there. Okay, now that we know the importance of getting to that 730 score, now let's talk about what does it get to that score of 730 or 760. So one thing that I want you to remember is when it comes to acing the GMAT, it is all about ability. Okay. And the reason why I want to make sure that you understand this is why, because when people think about acing the GMAT, the first thing they really think about is timing. And if I look at, and if I were to really poll over here and say, hey, what is the one worry that you want to go away? the answer that I would get, the most common answer that I would get is timing. Help me improve my timing. Help me improve my stamina. Those are important things, but when it comes to building ability, building ability is about 80% of acing the GMAT. Fixing your timing, fixing, adding more stamina, and so on and so forth is probably, all of that constitutes to about 20% of this. Now it's important, which means, you want to get to that 730, 740 score, you need to be at 100%. But if you don't build ability, fixing your timing, building stamina is not going to help you in any way. On the other hand, if you build your ability, you won't have to spend as much time fixing your timing. Okay. So just to really tell you, make that point, I'm going to really compare two terms, which is accuracy, a term that you guys know really well, and ability. Now, let me ask this question. What is accuracy? What is accuracy? If you can put your answer in the short answer poll on the right. And again, I'm going to broadcast results. I've gotten about 6 answers right now. I'm going to broadcast results once I get about 15 answers, 11, 12, 14, 18. Good. You should be able to see others' answers. Perfect. All right. Percentage of correct answers. You're very right. So accuracy is when you take a 10-question quiz, you actually get 8 out of those 10 correctly. You say my accuracy is 80%. It's a percentage of questions that you answer correctly. Your accuracy doesn't tell you anything about your ability. If you're in that 10-question quiz, if 1,000 people take the 10-question quiz and half of them get 8 out of them or 8 out of 10 correctly, then that 80% accuracy is 50% ability. So accuracy is a number which does not have rank or difficulty level into it. Ability is a number which has rank associated with it. It tells you how good you are compared to other test takers. Ability truly is a rank. In a quiz, you may have 70% accuracy, but you could have 95th percentile ability. And that's something which is really, really important to understand. Okay. So let's understand accuracy versus ability over here. I'm gonna what we're going to do is we're going to simulate an adaptive algorithm or adaptive test algorithm, and the GMAT works similar to this, not exactly like this, but in a fashion which is very similar to this. So if you understand this principle, you'll have a much easier time understanding how the GMAT works. What you see over here is on the x-axis, you see question numbers on the test, question numbers 1 to 6, and on the y-axis, you see the difficulty level. The higher I go on y-axis, the more difficult a question becomes. So we're going to compare the attempts of two students. Student 1, or case 1 as it's called over here, gets the first question. The first question is more often than not around that median difficulty level. He gets the first question right. Now what happens? The test increases the difficulty level, gets a second question which is of a higher difficulty level. He gets that right. He gets a third question which is of a much higher difficulty level. He gets that wrong. Gets the fourth question which is of a difficulty level between question number 2 and question number 3. And how do I determine that? Let's kind of draw horizontal lines. I'm going to try and draw horizontal lines from question 2 and question 3, and you see that question 4 lies between these two. That over here, he gets that right, gets question 5th, slightly higher difficulty level, gets that wrong. And you can, as you really see this, what you're really trying to figure out is how the test is kind of narrowing down around your ability. Case 2 or student 2 gets the first question, similar difficulty level, gets that wrong. Gets the second question, much lower difficulty level, gets that right. Gets the third question, again, higher difficulty level, gets that wrong. The difficulty level reduces for the fourth question. He gets the fourth question right, and he gets the fifth question right as well. Now, my question to you, If we were to end the test at this particular question, at question number 5, at the end of question number 5, who would be doing better? At the end of question number 5, who would be doing better? So is it student 1 or student 2? Let's get a few more responses. Okay, overwhelmingly people say student 1 would be doing better. That's great. Now, my question to you is, why do you think student 1 is doing better? Why is student 1 doing better? Okay. I have some really good answers. Thank you for that. Because student 1 got answered more difficult questions correctly, that's why he's doing better. That is really good. Okay. What I'm really happy about is that a whole lot of you did not answer. Your answer did not say because you got the first questions right. No, that is not the reason. That is an observation. It's not the reason. The reason student 1 is doing better is because he answered more difficult questions correctly. Now, one thing which is there is when you do look at the observation, when you observe this, student 1 got 5 questions. Each one of those questions was above the average difficulty level. Student 2 only got 1 question, and that was at the average difficulty level, and that was this question number 1 over here, this one, essentially. Both of them identical accuracy. Both of them answered 3 out of 5 questions correctly. But despite that, because of the difficulty level of questions, student 1 was doing better. Now you may say this seems very intuitive, this is very logical, but I will tell you, even though this is very logical, when it comes to the real test, many people don't get it. And I'll give you an example of this. But when it comes to acing the GMAT, it's very different from acing a regular test. Why? Because on the GMAT, there's this concept of a question picker that has to make a decision to really determine which question to deliver to you. And if you don't prove to the test that you have the ability to answer difficult questions correctly, that question picker is going to serve easier questions to you. Now, can you guys tell me, when it comes to easy versus difficult questions, how many more points or what's the ratio of the number of points you get for an easy versus a difficult question? How many more points? Okay. It's between 2.5 and 3x when it comes to easy versus a difficult question, or for more specifically what you use the terminology as 500 level versus a 700 level question. Even though there is no 500 versus a 700 level question, it's easy versus difficult. A 700 level question, in my estimates based on the analysis that we've done, carries about 2.5 to 3x as many points as a 500 level question does. Okay. So when it comes to acing the GMAT, you have these two challenges. Challenge 1 is to make sure that difficult questions are served to you. Challenge 2 is to answer them correctly. Now, this was just a principle, and now I'm going to share some actual examples with you. What you see over here are GMAT prep reports of 2 students. This is the old GMAT prep where, when on the verbal side, you used to have 41 questions. And the reason why I have this is because in the old GMAT prep, the test gave us a lot of analytics. It gave us a lot of insights. And as we transition from the old to the new GMAT prep, the scoring algorithm has been identical as per what GMAT tells us. So the inferences that we can draw from the old GMAT prep also apply to the current GMAT, and we see that with our students. Essentially, we've gotten close to 15,000 data points over there. So what you see is 2 students over here, and when you look at question numbers 11 to 41 for these 2 students, you're going to find there's very little to choose between them. Both of them have made 9 mistakes between question numbers 11 and 41. The mistakes are more or less evenly spaced. You can't really say one student is better than the other if you just look at the mistakes. By the way, the red rectangles are the question numbers where the students made mistakes. The only difference over here is that student number 2 or student 2 got the first 2 questions wrong. So overall, he made 11 mistakes out of 41 questions. Student 1 made 9 mistakes. Now you'd expect their scores to be very similar, but when you look at their scores, student 1 got a verbal score of 32, which is, I think, about 65th percentile, if I remember correctly. Student 1 got a verbal score of 43, which is 97th percentile. So if you consider that 200,000 people take the GMAT every year, 97 percentile is 6,000 rank. A 65th percentile is about 70,000 rank. And then a lot of people, when you look at it, they really say, man, the test is really harsh. And make 2 mistakes, and you suddenly have 64,000 people between me and this other guy. How many of you are thinking that? Okay. Now, here is where a lot of people miss, and that's kind of where you look at data and you say, how do I interpret this data? When people look at this and they really say, hey, I got these 2 questions wrong and I got pushed back, the same people don't look at this and say, man, I can make 9 mistakes and still get to that 97th percentile, 9 out of 41. Right? I can answer about 22% of the questions incorrectly and still get 97th percentile. Which test allows you to do that? Okay. Now, and that kind of goes back to my prior point. When it comes to GMAT, it's not a test of accuracy. You can't look at accuracy on the GMAT and really say, hey, I'm doing well and I'm doing worse. GMAT is a test of ability. There's a question which says, Surya says if you screw up the first few questions, no matter what you get most of the rest of the questions, your score will always be less. No, GMAT. No, Surya, that is a myth. So in fact, I think 30 days back, I did a session on ESR analysis in which I showed 2 ESRs. The first one in which a person got the first few questions wrong and still was able to do better than a person who got the first few questions right. There's actual data from the official test. The reason is the difficulty level of those first few questions was really high. And in the odd case, you're going to really see that happen. So what matters is the difficulty level of questions that get served to you, where you make mistakes. If you make mistakes on easy questions, yes, it's difficult to recover for them. But then if you make mistakes on easy questions, you don't have the ability in the first place. And just to really make that point, let's just go to the next slide. So what you're looking at these 2 students, when you look at them, is, man, one guy's made 9 mistakes, the other guy's made 11 mistakes, but with the GMAT's treating them very differently. The GMAT does not care about mistakes. What it cares about is estimates of ability. And how the GMAT looks at them is this. The V32 guy had the abilities on the right hand side, which is in sentence correction, his estimate of ability was 81st percentile. In critical reasoning, it's 66th percentile. In reading comprehension, it was 59th percentile. For the V43 guy, the abilities were much higher. When you look at these 2 students through the lens of ability, do you see the difference between them? Do you see the difference? And that's what the GMAT looks at. It doesn't care as much about the number of mistakes you made. It cares about on what difficulty level of questions did you make a mistake. A recorded version of the ESR analysis session, definitely I can give it to you. Just remind me towards the end of the webinar or so. So the next question really is, what abilities does the GMAT measure? Okay. And to do that, it's actually fairly simple. When you think about that score of 800 and you say, I want to get 760 or 730 out of 800, you're only worried about that. But that 760 or 730 score is composed of quant and verbal abilities, or scores out of 60. Your quant score is composed of two different ability scores, one in arithmetic, the second in algebra geometry. On the verbal side, you have three different ability scores, one each in SC, CR, and RC. So when it comes to the score out of 800, that score out of 800 is a combination of 5 ability scores. When you build your study plan, you're building your study plan towards a unique combination of those 5 ability scores. Okay. Just to summarize this a bit more, on the official test, based on my estimate, based on the research that we've done, you have 5 different independent ability engines. These ability engines calculate these 5 abilities independently. Okay, combining the performance of these 5 abilities, your test calculates your verbal and quant score. Is there anyone over here who has his or her ESR with them? Okay. Do you see those abilities? Do you see these 5 abilities in the ESR or enhanced score report? Okay. And that's kind of where when you get to that score, what you should focus on is these abilities. ESR is when you take the GMAT, you get an enhanced score report, and which tells you how you perform during the test, and essentially what abilities did you get. And let me just tell you how to analyze your ESR. So you should see this pop up in the Q&A pod. So the question says, if you get 5 successive wrong after getting 15 correct in verbal, will my score ever reach above 40? I think the first question is, why would you get 5 successive wrong after getting 15 correct? There's something wrong about that picture that you're painting. Is the ESR reported after taking an official CAT? Unfortunately not. If you need an ESR-like analysis, you should take what we call as an e-GMAT mock or a sigma X mock. We give you your ability scores after that. In fact, here has a YouTube video. You should be able to get. You should be able to come see what a sigma X mock tells you. So, but coming back to where we were, when you think about taking the GMAT, ask yourself, what ability scores am I aiming for in these subsections? Because essentially, your GMAT score is composed of these ability scores. Again, acing the GMAT is about building ability. Now, we saw the principle, we saw one example. Let's look at one other example over here. There's another student, someone was asking, can I improve from 350 to a higher GMAT score? Here's an example of a guy who improved from 520, a verbal score of 17, to a verbal score of 40. Verbal score of 17 is in the low 20th percentile. The verbal score of 40 is 91st percentile. And this guy, and the reason why I have this is because this guy made more than 12 mistakes on the verbal section of the GMAT. You can see his ability scores, and these are screenshots from his ESR. But when you look at this over here, this is how his test progressed. And just to really tell you, this is a fairly complex graph. What the test does is it divides your entire verbal attempt in multiple groups of questions. So this is the first 10 questions. These are the next 10 questions, approximately the third set of 10 questions, and the final set of questions. So in the first set of questions, this guy did really, really well. The questions were not as difficult. He pretty much answered all of them correctly. The second set of 10 questions, the difficulty level increased. He still got majority of them correctly. In the third set of questions, where the difficulty level went really, really high, he started making more mistakes, which is obvious. When difficulty level goes high, even those who get to a 760, they get about 25 to 30% of 700 level or difficult questions wrong, but he still got more than half of the difficult questions correct over here in third block, and as questions became more difficult, he got more of them wrong, but only when the questions became more difficult. As a result, he got a verbal score of 40, or what we call as the 91st percentile. He was among the top 10% or top 9 percentile of students um, overall. Okay. Um, just to really show you can make mistakes as long as you don't make them on easy questions. Pawan says, since GMAT updates and recomputes percentiles every summer, do percentile scores change significantly after July? Actually, I've seen them change only once in the last 10 years that I've been there, and that was in the year 2011 when instead of when 760 became a 99th percentile. Um, so overall, it doesn't change a whole lot. On the quant side, we do see a few more changes depending on the mix of the population. On the verbal side, not as many. So yeah, overall GMAT score I haven't seen change a whole lot. Good question though. But again, the thing that I want you to remember is when it comes to acing the GMAT, it is about building ability. Build ability first and do something else later on. Okay, guys, open-ended questions are not for your open-ended responses are not for your questions. If you have a question, please put in the Q&A part. Okay. Now let's now get to how do you build that personalized study plan. Some of you've been asking, I've been stuck at that score. How do I get to a score of 730, 760? And when it comes to personalized study plans, we're going to really talk about. Actually, let me ask you this question. Why do you need a study plan, or what are the key questions that a study plan needs to answer? What are the top 3 questions? And I'll make it easy for you. Don't worry about more than 3. What are the top 3 questions that a study plan needs to tell you? Okay, where to focus my time? How much time to invest? Good. Level of ability, schedule, strategy, and SWOT, strength, weakness, opportunity, threat. Well, SWOT is more for business. For a personal level, I'd like to do a bit more, a slightly different framework. So SWOT only tells you your starting point. It doesn't tell you your strategy. All right. So really good answers. You've kind of pretty much answered the question when I combine your responses. So what does a study plan do? We've already answered that. So a study plan does 3 things for you. The first thing which is there is it tells you how will I reach my target GMAT score. And this is really important with regards to each one of you. Remember, about 10 minutes ago, we talked about that the GMAT is a test of 5 different abilities. So your study plan should tell you what abilities are you going to aim for. Now, if I were to really, parallel this to a war scenario, your study plan is your war strategy, and what it tells you is what all chasms, what all difficulties do you need to overcome to get there. Now, this is the answer. The first point is just what. The second point is that how much time or what kind of force, if you were to really draw a parallel to the war strategy, do you need to get to those milestones. So the first point tells you the milestones you need to achieve. The second is how much time, how much effort, or if you look at the war part, how much force do you need to achieve those milestones. And the third piece is, which is really important, is where do you need to deploy that force, or where do you need to put that time. How many of you really say, okay, once I have an estimate of how much time I need to put studying for the GMAT, I'm going to start practicing? Or how many of you, when you started studying for the GMAT, picked up the official guide and practiced through it? How many of you did that? You said, I'm going to pick up, I'm going to start solving questions, I'm going to go through it, and that's how I'm going to get to. All right, a lot of you did that. And when you did that, for a majority of you, and I'm playing by stats over here, I can tell you, you faltered on this. You definitely faltered on this. You may have faltered on this and this as well, but I can tell you definitely faltered on point number 3. Okay, and that's really, really important. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a case study for you, because I think this entire group is divided into 2 or 3 different kinds of students, and I'm going to take a case study of how to build your study plan. If you're an e-GMAT student, we give you an AI-driven tool that allows you to build your study plan. I'm going to show a screenshot from that particular tool over here. We launched this tool in March of 2019, and our students have built more than 15,000 study plans and unique study plans using this. So we're going to take 2 students. We're going to take Abby and Chase. Okay, Abby is someone who's good in verbal. Her verbal score is 31. Her quant score is 42. Chase is someone who's good in quant. His quant score is, his starting score is 49, or his current score is 49, and his current verbal score is 23. So when you put them, these are scores out of 60. When you translate them into percentiles, which are scores out of 100, which are the scores that I prefer just because they're much easier to comprehend. Abby is at 42nd percentile in quant. It just happens to be that a Q42 out of 60 is also a 42nd percentile today. Chase is at a 72nd percentile in quant. When it comes to verbal, SCCR and RC, you can see Abby is around that 60th percentile, and we're going to just focus on, and Chase is around that 33rd, 34th percentile. Now, at this point, if you want to just step back, get a pen and paper, write those numbers down, because, you know, so that these numbers make sense to you as we go forward, that would be great. So I'm going to give you about 5 to 7 seconds to do that. All right. So the question for you is, do you think Abby and Chase will need the same end quant scores and verbal scores to get to a 740? Now, their starting scores amount to a score of 600. So both of them are at 600. Do you think they need to put in the same amount of time in quant and verbal to achieve those scores? And do you think they should study the same material? And the answer to each one of these questions is no, as you guys are telling me. They don't need the same quant and verbal scores to get to that 740 score. They do not need to put in the same amount of time. And the content that they study is going to be very different. The metrics that they track are going to be very different. I'm going to really elaborate on each one of these. Okay. The first thing that you need to do, that each one of them needs to do, is go to gmatplanner.com and build your own personalized study plan. And as someone really said at a very high level, it just makes sense. Srini said that Abby needs to more focus on quant, while Chase needs to put in more focus on verbal. You're absolutely right, Srini, but what does that translate into the amount of time they need to spend? What does that translate into? How much time they need to spend and where is a very important question. Okay, the first thing is go to GMAT Planner, build your personalized study plan. So Abby goes to GMAT Planner and builds a personalized study plan, and I'm going to actually share this presentation with you. So if the fonts are not very legible over here, they will be legible in the presentation. And what GMAT Planner does is it recommends to Abby that Abby gets to a Q48, which is 65th percentile in quant. This is 65th percentile in quant, or 65th percentile in arithmetic and algebra, and then a verbal score of 42, and you can see the percentiles in SCCR and RC, which is in the 90th percentile or so. Okay. Now, based on this, you get essentially an overall plan as to where should Abby be spending her time, and what you can really see, and your screen should be covered with this plan right now, is that in sentence correction, where Abby was at 59th percentile, she'd need about 2.1 weeks to get to that 94th percentile. Similarly, in reading comprehension, where she's at 60th percentile, Abby will need 2 weeks to get to that 90th percentile. On the quant side in algebra, where she's at 42nd percentile, she doesn't need to get to that 90th percentile, so she needs less time, 1.4 weeks, to get to that 65th percentile. And one of the things which is really important is, getting that right estimate of time. The second is also knowing what is it that you're not going to do. Why? Because if Abby is not aiming for that 90th percentile in quant, then she doesn't need to be able to solve the most challenging questions that the test is going to throw at her. And knowing that is really powerful. Why? Because it tells you where you need to focus your energy. It tells you where should you not be bothered. It also tells you where you should be bothered. If in sentence correction, she's aiming for the 94th percentile, which means she should be able to answer the most challenging questions. Not the same in quant. Okay. For Chase, now this guy is Chase over here. You can see this. The story is slightly different. His strength is quant. So for Chase, he needs to get to a quant Q50 and he needs to get to approximately 86, 88th percentile on verbal. Okay. But then you may say on verbal it seems very similar, but the journey doesn't end here. Okay. Now how much time does Chase need? And that's where you really see that. Your screen should be covered again in about another 4 to 5 seconds. Chase doesn't need as much time in quant. He's already at 72nd percentile in arithmetic. He just needs about a week to get to that 83rd percentile over here. On the verbal side, however, he needs more time than Abby did. In sentence correction, he needs almost 3 weeks to go from a 34th percentile to a 90th percentile. In reading comprehension, he needs 3 weeks again to go from that 35th percentile to that 88th percentile. SK says, can you complete arithmetic algebra in 0.9 weeks? SK, that's an excellent question that you ask, and let's kind of answer this question in about 5 to 7 minutes. Okay. Now, to many of you may find that Chase and Abby have very similar plans. Actually, they don't, and let me just contrast those. For Chase, he's aiming for a score of Q50 and V40. Abby is aiming for a score of Q48 and V42. A Q48 is very different from a Q50. A V42 similarly is different from a V40. Now, if you focus on the amount of time they're spending, Chase is going to spend 9 weeks on verbal, whereas Abby is going to only spend 6 weeks. Now, for those of you prepared for the GMAT, if you actually need 9 weeks to do something and you're asked to do the same thing in 6 weeks, what happens? What happens if you really need 9 weeks to do something and how does it change how you study? You come up short. Why? Because you start to rush through. You start to rush through content. You are focused on the clock, right? And when you rush through the content, you don't focus on understanding. You don't focus on understanding. You don't actually excel. When you don't excel, you don't hit that percentile. Anyone here who builds something? Anyone here who writes, not supports, but writes or builds new products over here, whether it's software or hardware? Anyone here who builds new products? Okay, when you're building a new product and in the definition stage or in the building stage or what we call as coding or essentially construction stage, what happens if you're asked to rush through things in the definition or the development stage? When you're building a new product, a truly new product, you get bugs, you get rework, right? You falter. That's exactly what happens when you get the wrong estimates and and you start rushing through things, you get bugs. You don't get to that 90th percentile, you get to that 60th percentile. And then you don't know why you haven't reached there. Jay says, when you say 1.5 weeks, how many hours are you considering? That's a great question. So typically, we don't consider hours. We ask you how many hours can you put in, and based on that, the planner calculates the amount of time. But what we recommend our students to do is to put in about 18 hours a week at least. That ensures consistency. There are a few who can put in 30. There are a few who can put in 15. But if you can put in fewer than 15, we say, hey, you just pause your GMAT preparation, fix whatever else you need to fix, but you need to put in at least 15 hours in a week. Great question, Jay. Okay, but that's not the biggest difference. Okay, not just the time estimates, but also where you need to spend that time. And that's probably the biggest reason why people don't get to their scores. So what you see is a chart over here where you say ability versus the stages of learning. Okay, and you see starting from learning concepts to learning application to mastering application to refining to perfection. Okay. So when you learn concepts before you learn applications, you reach that 25th percentile ability. Once you've learned application, you reach that 50th percentile ability. Once you master application, that's when you're at that 70th percentile ability. To go from that 70th percentile to that 90th percentile, that's what you need to do to refine to perfection. Okay, and from there on, all you need to do, once you hit that 70th to 90th percentile, you need to maintain your performance. Okay. So when you think about Abby, and you can see her percentiles over here, where do you think Abby needs to spend her time? You saw that chart before. Where do you think Abby needs to spend her time? And in sentence correction, where do you think Abby needs to spend her time? All right, good. Master application. Thank you. So Abby is already at 59th percentile. She knows all the concepts. She doesn't need to, if she were an e-GMAT student, she doesn't need to go through the e-GMAT course. She only needs to go through very selective portion of the course. But then she needs to focus on mastering application and refining to perfection. Okay. Now, I also want to make sure, before I do that, I want to make sure that you see one other thing with regards to Abby. Okay. Abby is spending twice as much time, which is actually probably counterintuitive to you if you look at Abby once again over here. Abby is spending twice as much time on verbal than on quant. Why? Because her score is verbal driven. She's spending 6 weeks on verbal, she's spending 3 weeks on quant. She doesn't need to ace GMAT quant. Okay. And a lot of people don't understand that. They say, I'm strong in verbal, I'm not going to spend as much time on verbal. They actually kill their GMAT scores. Okay. Similarly on CR, she knows all the concepts. Her starting score is around that 60th percentile. She needs to focus on mastering application. She needs to focus on refining to perfection. The same thing in reading comprehension. Now, what about arithmetic and algebra? What does Abby need to do when it comes to arithmetic and algebra? Learn concepts. Yes, this is simple. I mean, this is logical when you think about it. And she only needs to master application. She doesn't need to worry about refining to perfection. Now, is all of this very logical? Is all of this logical? Prior to coming to this webinar, how many of you had this approach? And that's very important. When it comes to being methodical, this is what you need to do. By the way, anyone who builds products in their job, isn't that how you build products? In principle, when it comes to building capabilities, that's how, right? This is something that has been there. This is how we've been doing things for the last 50 years. It's just that when it comes to learning architectures are not built to do that. All right, I'm going to take a couple of questions now. What does mastering application mean, and how do you maintain performance? Those are two questions that I see in there. Okay. So, what does mastering application mean? Mastering application means that when I see a question in front of me, when I see an SC question, I can really say, I'm going to really understand the meaning, I'm going to identify the errors, and I'm going to then do my POE to come to the correct answer. But I am confident, regardless of whether it's a short sentence versus a long one, I'll be able to identify its meaning. That's what mastering application is. I'm confident that I know all the 70 or so error types that are tested on GMAT sentence correction. Okay, and Payal is going to come in about 5 minutes to demonstrate what mastering application feels like. For those of you who know GMAT sentence correction, you really see what mastering application feels like. Maintaining, we actually have a separate module on how to maintain your performance. If you're an e-GMAT student, write to us, we'll tell you how to maintain your performance. Now, Chase has a very different journey. Remember, Chase is at 34th percentile. So what does Chase need to do? What does Chase need to do in sentence correction? He needs to learn concepts. Yes. He needs to spend a majority of his time in learning concept and application. That's why he has 3 weeks in sentence correction, 3 weeks in critical reasoning, 3 weeks in reading comprehension, because he needs to do that additional step. Someone was asking me earlier, when it comes to quant, does he need to worry about learning concepts and mastering application? Does he need to do that? No. He needs to refine to perfection. That's what he needs to do. Someone was asking me earlier when I showed that Chase only needs 0.9 weeks in arithmetic and 0.9 weeks in algebra. He says, is that enough time to go through the course? And here is your answer. He doesn't need to go through the course. He needs to refine to perfection. Okay, and one of the most common questions that I get, and I understand why you ask these questions, is how much time do I need to finish the course? My answer is, why the hell do you need to finish the course? We are going to tell you what you need to do to get to your target GMAT score. Okay, and I understand why you say this, because no one in the world, no other prep company tells you this piece. Why? Because their courses aren't designed to give you feedback. Their courses aren't designed to be modular in this particular manner. In every other course, what you're going to see is, I'm going to study, and then take mocks, and then hopefully I get to that GMAT score. No, that's not how acing the GMAT needs to work. That's not how product development or ability development works. Ability development means getting feedback, getting to know that you're actually improving while you're doing this. Okay, and the thing which is there is, even though both of these guys are aiming for that 740 score, their path to that 740, the time required to achieve that score, the various components, where they're studying from, what they're focusing on, they're very, very different. And that's why you need that personalized study plan to get to that score. Okay. And again, if you're an e-GMATer, you can write to me. If you're not an e-GMATer, want to schedule a one-on-one consultation, you can also write to me. So the next piece is, how do you build ability? And I'm going to briefly do this, and Payal would take over over here. But what have we learned so far? Just to summarize, 730 plus score, really important, $500,000 of ROI. GMAT as a test it's a test of ability. and you need to build ability when it comes to acing the GMAT. All of those other things with regards to timing, stamina, and other pieces, they're important, but they only are that 20%. 80% is ability. Your PSP, your personalized study plan, helps you create that path. It tells you you're spending the right amount of time on the appropriate stage of learning. And then there are 4 stages of learning. One is learning concepts, the second is learning application, the third is mastering, and the fourth is refining to perfection. Those are your stages of learning, and then you have to maintain that performance as well. Okay. Again, you can see how the percentile improves as you go from one stage to the other. Now, let me ask this poll question. How many of you are stuck at that 60th percentile, or actually stuck at any subsection? Just select yes or type yes or say me, doesn't one way or the other. Okay. So the thing which is really important for you to understand is, why is it that people don't improve beyond the 60th percentile? It's not their capability. It's essentially their attitude towards learning. And just to really do that, if you think about the GMAT, about 200,000 people take the GMAT every year, which means when you're at 60th percentile, you're in the top 80,000. When you're at 90th percentile, you're in the top 20,000 people. When it comes to learning, and this is just in sentence correction, both of you probably spend about the same amount of time learning. The starting ability is very similar, and the capability, and when I say capability, it's the ability to absorb information, it's the ability to apply is very similar. A lot of people think people who get to that 770 score, they're super smart, they have that innate capability that is a very rare quality. That is not the case. If you look at some of the success stories on our YouTube channel, what you're going to find is people go from that 430 to that 740 score, and yet there are people who are stuck at 700 for months and months and months, and suddenly they get to at 740 or 760. That suddenly happens not because a part of their capability improved. It suddenly happened because they started focusing on the right things. They started using the right methods, and that is what matters. When it comes to the GMAT, most of you have the capability. Okay, and the thing which is there is, when it comes to that 90th percentile, it is about achieving perfection. And how do you achieve perfection overall? Let's kind of look at how a 60th percentile guy and a 90th percentile guy looks at and prepares for the GMAT. For a 60th percentile guy, when it comes to GMAT's intense correction, it's purely about learning 8 major error types, one each in subject verb, pronouns, modifiers, parallelism, comparison, meaning. And meaning for that particular person is an error type. Idioms is not there actually in there, so that's the 8th one that I was missing. For a 90th percentile student, life is very different. For a 60th percentile student, primarily uses splits as a method of solving questions, which means the person looks at the question stem, looks at all the other options to really say, hey, how are the options different, and then focuses on that difference. Hey, everyone seems to market splits. When you're learning the content, they get about 7 to 10 times, they get feedback about 7 to 10 times during learning. And when it comes to the time spent between learning the content and practicing the content, 30% of the time they spend on learning the content, 70% of the time they spend on practicing the content. Those of you who are stuck at that 60th percentile on the left, does that seem very similar? Does it seem a fair summary of how you approach GMAT's intense correction? Okay. A 90th percentile guy achieves this, looks at this very differently. They look at GMAT sentence correction as about learning how to read a sentence and then learning 200 error types. And the same error types, major categories don't change, but there are subcategories in in each one of these. And they learn it, they focus on that. They use meaning as the primary method to solve every question. They don't consider meaning as an error type. And there's a big difference here. When you consider meaning as the primary method to solve questions, what you mean by that is the first thing that you do when you see the original sentence and sentence correction and an SC question is you look for the meaning. When you look at experts, they're going to really say use splits. Okay, and just because a lot of the experts are native speakers of English language, for them meaning is innate. For a lot of non-natives, in fact, a number of natives now, meaning is not innate. If you want to really see how successful this meaning-based approach is, if you go to GMAT Club's Share GMAT Experience and you click on the tag e-GMAT, you're going to get 10 pages of success story. 10 pages. Okay, 10 pages means 500 success stories. If you click on the tag of any other test prep company, you're probably going to get fewer than 4 pages. That's the delta. And each one of those 10 pages will tell you meaning is important. The 90th percentile student gets about 80 to 120 feedback points just in sentence correction, And when it comes to the time spent between learning and practice, spend 60% of the time learning and 40% of the time practicing. It's the same number of hours, by the way. It's a 90th percentile student solves way fewer questions. What does number of feedback points mean? It means when you're studying subject verb must exist, do you get feedback that you can figure out subject verb must exist in easy, medium, and hard questions? That's a feedback point. As an individual, do you have that capability? When you're looking at verb ing modifiers, do you have the capability to identify all the 3 ways in which verb ing modifiers can be used correctly? When you look at a causal and predictive argument, are you able to understand where alternate cause is the weakener, where it isn't? When you look at an even odd question, are you able to understand the impact of powers on even and odd? That's what a feedback point is. It's not about even and odd questions. It's about that when you think about this, looking at sentence correction as 200 major error types, there's a feedback point built in each one of these. And just to really tell you, if you're an e-GMAT student, what kind of feedback you get, you're going to really see that. But the thing which you have to understand is if GMAT sentence correction tests 200 concepts and you want to aim for that 90th percentile, how can you get to that 90th percentile if you only get 10 feedback points for these 200 odd concepts? So before I invite Payal over, I'm going to just really tell you how many feedback points and where do you get those. And this is just for the sentence correction course over here. When you're learning concepts, which is on the learning platform, you get about 75 personalized feedback points in the e-GMAT SC course. When you watch each video, we capture close to 50 data points for each video. We combine those data points to give you 1 feedback point. We built this technology right from grounds up to do that. When you learn application, we give you 23, while learning the content, you learn application 23 times. In each of these application files, you have about 4 questions overall, and you get feedback points. When you're mastering application and refining to perfection, you get between 30 and 50 feedback points. And while you're taking mocks, you get another 5 feedback points just in sentence correction. Okay. So with that, I'd now like to invite Payal to demonstrate how to learn application and refine to perfection. These feedback points are automated through the system. You get feedback points every 15 to 30 minutes. So you don't have to wait for an instructor to come and tell you. This is built into the system design. But overall, you get 100 feedback points during the learning stage. You get another 50 feedback points during the refinement stage. Okay, so now I'm going to invite Payal, who's my co-founder, to talk about how do you achieve that mastery of application to achieve that 90th percentile score.
Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar here, and thank you Rajat for the first part of this webinar here. Alright, so we're going to talk about how is it that you can achieve mastery of application. But before I get started with that section, let me just make sure that all of you can hear me clearly. So let me just get the poll here. Alright, can you guys hear me clearly? Sounds good. All right then. And Happy New Year to everyone. I hope that all of you had a wonderful 2019 and are looking forward to even more wonderful 2020. And I am very sure that all of you will be able to accomplish one New Year resolution for sure, and that is to get to your target GMAT score and get to the target school of your choice for your MBA dreams. All right. Okay, so let's get going with accomplishing that dream of yours, and let's talk about how is it that you can achieve mastery in order to get to that 90th percentile. And we are going to talk about all of this in the context of sentence correction, but all of the fundamentals that I'm going to explain to you will be applicable across the board for each and every section of GMAT. Okay. Now, in order to achieve that mastery, what you have to do is you need to follow a step-by-step method to solve questions. Now, many a time students confuse learning for a particular section as they basically consider learning for a particular section synonymous with learning concepts in that section. But they don't really, they learn the concepts and then they just practice thousands and thousands of questions, and that is a very, very big misstep. So what I want all of you to pay attention to is the fact that apart from learning the concepts, you have to learn how do you apply those concepts. And you cannot really accomplish mastery of application by simply practicing questions from numerous sources, from unreliable sources at times, or you don't really need to solve thousands of questions to learn that method and to achieve mastery in application. And I'm going to demonstrate that to you today. Okay. The second thing is that when you're learning the application, you need to make sure that you are getting the feedback from each and every question that you solve, and you're implementing that feedback into your process. You're making sure that you don't make the same mistakes. You're making sure that you carry on with the principles that are working for you. You carry on with the method that is to be used consistently to solve each and every question. Okay, so getting that, in order to accomplish that mastery with optimum number of questions, and I'm using the word optimum very cautiously because, as I said, you should not be solving thousands of questions. You need to have a very solid approach to achieving that mastery of application. And for that, you have to make sure that you utilize detailed solutions that are based on the method that you need to use to solve questions in the exam environment. Okay, so you have to get that feedback from the detailed solutions. Okay, lastly, to efficiently master that feedback, you have to get the feedback and you need to utilize the feedback so that you can implement those gaps, so that you can implement those corrective actions to make sure that you don't carry on with the gaps that you have in your method. Okay, so again, the key thing over here is you have to learn the method. And again, I'm emphasizing on this. This may seem very logical, but this most logical approach is actually missed by numerous students, and that's why they have to take the GMAT again and again in order to get to their score. And many a times that multiple attempts actually do not lead them to the score that they are looking for. Okay, so again, you have to learn the method. Okay, that's number one thing. Now, to effectively master the method, again, you have to be effective and you have to be efficient. Both those things are important. Okay, to effectively master the method, you need detailed solutions, and I'm going to talk about what are the characteristics of these detailed solutions. To efficiently master the method, you need feedback, and Rajat has already talked about the feedback points. I'm going to be giving you a little bit more detail about those feedback points so that you understand what do we mean by that and how is it that you should be utilizing that feedback into your method. Okay, all right, so let's now explore the method and we'll take up sentence correction question for demonstration. And as I said, this thing applies across the board for each and every type of question on the GMAT. We are just taking one sentence correction question for demonstration purposes. Okay. Now, before I go further, I'd like to understand what is the method that you use today to solve an SC question. So you can tell me in step 1 I do this, in step 2 I do this, in step 3 I do this, or you can just give me an overall method that you use. I may ask you for more details if what you tell me is not specific enough. Now, when you say meaning based, I want you to tell me what do you mean by that. Meaning and then split, vertical scan, split errors, meaning, okay. Understand each clause and see if all fits in. Meaning and then split, split and eliminate. Okay, what does the sentence say? Okay, all right. Scan options, identify the probable issue, read the sentence, elimination method. Okay, that's very detailed and thank you for that. Look out for obvious errors, and I believe this is after you understand the meaning, you look for obvious errors. Okay, vertical scan. Step 1, find out if I know what the error is. Step 2, go to split and then eliminate and select the best fit. Okay, all right. So I have a mixed bag of the methods here. One is where you understand the meaning of the sentence and then you go further. The other method is that you do a quick scan and you figure out, okay, what could be wrong, and then if you need to, you look at the sentence for the detailed meaning and then you go further. Okay, so primarily a number of people are telling me that they utilize the splits method. Okay, all right, so now let's carry on with this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you one sentence correction question and I want you to solve that question with whichever method you use. Again, I'm going to give you 1.5 minutes because that's typically the time that an average student takes in order to solve an SC question. Okay, so here you go. It's a completely underlined sentence, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the poll here. Okay. All right. There you go, and I'm going to start the timer now. Go ahead. All right, 90 seconds are up. I have about 50 responses yet, so I'll give you another 15-20 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, so majority of you have selected choice C as the correct answer, 51% of the class to be exact. Choice D is the next candidate, 22%, and choice E is, okay, 16%. Okay, all right. So let's, I'm going to tell you the correct answer shortly. But tell me, how would you approach, is it possible to solve this question using the splits method? And let me get the yes no poll as well over here. So tell me, how would you solve this question using a vertical scan? When I say splits method, what I mean is finding similarities and dissimilarities in the answer choices. Okay, it is very difficult. Okay, because again, when questions get difficult, it's very hard to identify splits. It's very hard to identify what is similar and what is dissimilar, because you have to scan through all the 5 choices one by one. And again, it's not very easy. For example, over here, I can see that each of the choices begins with a different starting, the church coin, while with the ulterior motive, and then you have the church coin again. So there are choices A and D are pretty similar from that regards, choices A and D, but then choices B, C and E, they are different. But when it comes to but, there is but in all the 4 choices except for choice C, which again some of you may have thought, okay, that while replaces but, so then it's okay. So again, it becomes really difficult to figure out what is correct and what is incorrect if you're simply looking for, if you're doing that scan to figure out what the meaning to figure out, to give you clues, right? So clearly you cannot use splits method, you cannot use the vertical scanning or identifying similarities and dissimilarities method consistently. Again, consistently is the key, because remember, in order to get to that 90th percentile, you need to be consistent in your performance through the test, which means that, and again, you have to be able to solve difficult questions consistently, right? So again, it would become really difficult. You cannot utilize this method in order to solve questions in a consistent manner, right? So that's the reason why this method won't work. Now, to accurately solve difficult questions consistently, again, these words, they are not there just because I wanted to create a fancy sentence. They're there because they hold a very, very big significance. To accurately solve difficult questions consistently, okay, you need to utilize the meaning-based method. And what is that meaning-based method is what I'm going to talk about now, okay? The first step in this meaning-based method is that you read the sentence by strategically pausing at appropriate points so that you understand the meaning completely. I do not want you to have just a brief idea about the sentence, just the overall idea about the sentence. I want you to have a complete understanding of meaning. And I'll tell you why that is important. Okay. So the first thing over here is that you have to read the sentence by strategically pausing. Now, when I'm using the word pausing, automatically the thought that will come to your head is that, wait a minute, it's a timed exam and you're asking me to pause, you're asking me to go slow. Absolutely, yes, I'm not mistaken. I want you to go slow. Okay, I want you to slowly read the sentence so that you can understand each and every aspect of that sentence, because that level of understanding is absolutely critical for you to be able to solve verbal questions correctly. Okay, and this just doesn't apply to SC. It applies to critical reasoning. It applies to reading comprehension. Okay, and that's why I said whatever I'm talking about here, I'm taking sentence correction as an example, but all of this applies to each and every section in verbal. Okay, so you have to read slowly. All right. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read the sentence slowly, the way I would solve any sentence correction question. For that matter, the way I would solve any verbal question. Okay. So the church coined the date February 14th as Valentine's Day with an ulterior motive. So I'll just stop here because I've read a big chunk of sentence. Okay. The church coined the date Feb 14th as Valentine's Day. Okay. So the church basically designated Feb 14th as Valentine's Day. That's something which I've read so far, with an ulterior motive. Now, the church had an ulterior motive to Christianize, and Christianize is in quotes, the pagan celebration of Lupercalia. Okay, so with this, what I get to know is that, okay, the church had an ulterior motive, had a motive to Christianize certain celebration, Christianize a non-Christian celebration, which was a pagan celebration of some celebration, which is called Lupercalia. Okay, is claimed by a few experts. Okay, now this is where, how many of you, when you read this part, felt a little bit odd? You know, you felt there was a certain gap, or there was a certain jump. How many of you felt that way? Absolutely. Now, whenever you feel such jumps or certain gaps, or you feel, oh, wait a minute, what happened here? Those are clues those are things that you are picking up on as you're reading the sentence slowly, and those are clues that are telling you that there is something not quite right here. Okay, so that is a very big benefit, another benefit of reading the sentence slowly, because as you're reading it slowly, you will be able to identify these imperfections in the given sentence. Okay, now such imperfections would be very hard to identify if you're reading the sentence fast, or if you're doing speed reading. Okay, but when you're reading the sentence slowly with an intent to understand the role of each and every entity in the sentence, you will be able to pick up on such imperfections in the sentence. Okay, but when you experience such imperfections, I don't want you to stop there. I just want you to make a note of it, that okay, there's something not quite right with it, and I want you to understand the meaning that that particular part provides in the context of what you've already read. Okay, so in this case, I know something is not quite right with this part here. I know that is claimed is a little bit off, but I'm going to continue reading the sentence, and I'm going to understand what is claimed by a few experts means in the context of this sentence. So the church coined the date Feb 14th as Valentine's Day with that ulterior motive is claimed by a few experts. So which means that, okay, what the author is telling me is that there are some experts who think that church designated Feb 14th as Valentine's Day with this ulterior motive to Christianize. So this is one view that is presented. Okay, now let me read further. But it is celebrated on this date. Now I see the word but. Now whenever I see the word but, it should tell me that, okay, there is a contrast here. There is a different meaning or a different direction of the sentence. So let me now read it. But it is celebrated on this date. So okay. So I understand that, okay, the author gave views of a certain set of experts who thought that church designated Feb 14th as Valentine's Day with this intent, but it is celebrated on this date. Okay, let me read further. Now he's presenting some other view about why Valentine's Day is celebrated on Feb 14th. On this date, to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial. Okay, to honor but it is celebrated on this date to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial is the more prevalent belief. Okay, so this is the more prevalent belief. So really speaking, there are two, from the overall sentence, what I get is that there are two claims about Feb 14th being celebrated as Valentine's Day. Claim number one is that church designated it with a specific motive. Claim number two is that it's celebrated because it to honor the anniversary of Saint Valentine's. Now, claim number one is made by a few experts, and claim number two is the more prevalent belief. Okay, so these are the three aspects of meaning that I was able to understand from the sentence, and this is the level of clarity that I want each one of you to have when you are reading any sentence correction sentence. Okay, these aspects of meaning are very critical. Okay, so now the next thing that I'm going to ask you is, mark all the points that you were able to extract when you solved the question on your own, and I'm going to get the poll here. Give me 1 second. Okay. Okay, I want you to identify the ones that you were not able to extract. Okay, so mark the ones that you were not able to identify. And The reason why, now because you were not able to identify, so I want you to make a note of this thing, that majority of you were not able to identify that claim 1 was made by a few experts and claim 2 was the more prevalent belief. And I'm going to tell you why this is so significant. Okay, but I want you to make a note of this, that out of the 3, again, there are some of you who were not able to identify number 2 and number 1 as well, but that's okay, right? Again, that is also not okay. You should have been able to identify those, but majority of you were not able to identify aspect number 3, and that led you to select the choice that you selected. And I'm telling you right now, that led you to select choice C. And I'm going to explain to you why this is so significant. Okay, all right. Now tell me one more thing. When you read the sentence, did you feel confident about the meaning of the sentence when you read choice A? Before you started looking at the other choices, did you feel confident that, yes, I understand everything that there is to understand in the sentence and I'm all set to answer this question correctly? Okay. Now, half of the class was not confident about it. Okay. That is a clue that you're not ready to look at the answer choices. Okay. Now, when you are in the test environment, it's a completely different thing. But when you are learning the method, I don't want you to look at the answer choices if you have that nagging feeling in the back of your head that there's something not quite right. I don't understand what the sentence is saying. Don't lean towards the answer choices to help you identify the clues to solve the question. How many of you lean towards the answer choices to give you clues to solve the question? Don't do that. That's actually the worst thing to do. Why? Because the answer choices, and again, I'm talking about difficult questions. I'm not talking about easy questions. Easy questions are by definition easy. So there aren't that many complications implemented in those easy questions. But your goal is to solve difficult questions. And for that, you have to utilize the method. You have to learn the method. Okay. Now, if you are solving questions in the learning process, when you feel that, okay, there is a question that you're solving, that's a practice question, not an application file question, whichever question you're solving from a trusted source. You look at that question and you read the sentence and you don't get a good feeling and you still think that, okay, let me take a look at the answer choices to find clues. That is a very, very bad signal. Don't do that. Whenever you're tempted to do that, stop right there and then. Go back to the answer choice, go back to the original sentence, hide the answer choices. Just look at the original sentence to understand, to extract all the aspects of meaning. Till the time you don't do that, do not even look at the answer choices, because you are now wasting that precious question. You are not gaining anything from that precious question. Does that make sense? Yes or no? And again, we are wired in a certain way to look at questions, and I don't blame you guys to look for answer choices as clues, because that's the thing which is floating around in the community right now. But I want you to refrain from doing that, and that's what 98th percentile students do. They make sure that they are doing each and every step of the process correctly. Only then they move forward to the next step. Okay, and again, I'm going to make another disclaimer here. I'm talking about this when you are in the learning phase. When you are in the test taking phase, that's a completely different scenario. By that time, if you are taking the test, if you are taking a mock test, you have already accomplished a certain ability level. In that case, now you have to do time management, right? So that's a completely different ball game. Okay, what I'm talking about is when you're learning the process, what is it that you need to be focusing on? Okay. All right, so let's move forward now. Now, if you couldn't understand any of the 3 aspects of the meaning when you read the sentence on your own, then again, so let me just say, if you were able to understand all the 3 aspects of meaning, then that means you can understand the meaning of the sentence well enough. How many of you got all the 3 aspects of the meaning when you read the sentence on your own? Okay, so for those of you who were able to understand all the 3 aspects of the meaning, you can understand the meaning of the sentence well enough. Good job. Okay, for those of you who weren't able to get who made a mistake there, who weren't able to get all the three aspects of the meaning. You need to build your skill set in understanding the meaning of the sentence. Okay, that's very, very, very important. Okay, all right. Now, how do you build that skill set? I'll talk about that. So, you need to master the skill of strategic pausing. Okay, and that is why we have developed, because this skill is so very important, is so very critical for all of verbal. That's why we have developed this specialized course called as Master Comprehension. Okay, in this course, all we teach you is how do you read the sentence to understand the meaning of the sentence. Okay, so we teach you how long sentences are formed, how do you deconstruct the long sentences and whatnot. Okay, so we will talk. So again, definitely invest the time in going through this course. Now let's continue with the solution. Okay, now after we understand the meaning of the sentence, after we get all the aspects of the meaning of the sentence, what we do is we look at the errors in the original sentence. And again, this is where, as I told you earlier, if you experience those jumps or those gaps in the sentence, those are clues that there is something not quite right. And that is what we see over here. Is claimed by a few experts. It doesn't have a subject. Likewise, is the more prevalent belief, doesn't have any subject there, right? You can't really have a whole clause be the subject over here because it's not written in that manner, right? So those are the two errors. There is nothing fancy about the sentence. There's nothing, no other, fancy error here, okay? Now, you take this meaning analysis and this error analysis done on the original sentence, okay? Till this point, I haven't looked at any of the answer choices. Now you take this analysis with you and review each and every answer choices and reject each choice, each incorrect answer choice on solid grounds, either grammatical or logical or both. Okay. In the test environment, find one solid error and reject the answer choice and move on. Okay. But when you are practicing, when you're in the learning mode, find everything that's wrong with that answer choice so that you gain that expertise to figure out what all is wrong with a particular answer choice. Okay, so let's look at choice B, and let me get the poll here, and I am gonna tell what the correct answer choice is. In fact, you will be able to identify that on your own pretty shortly here. So choice B, choice A we know is wrong. So three of you who selected choice A, I hope that you're able to understand why choice A was wrong. Let's look at choice B. There were 4 people who selected this choice. So over here, with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration, a few experts do claim. So over here, it just means that these few experts had the ulterior motive, and that is absolutely wrong. Okay, and that is why this choice is wrong. But if you think about it, there is nothing grammatically wrong with this choice. Okay, so that's why this choice is wrong. Let's look at choice C, which was selected by majority of you. Now, so I'm going to read this choice. While a few experts claim that the church coined the date Feb 14th as Valentine's Day with an ulterior motive, all of this is fine, that a few experts claim, that part is fine. Their more prevalent belief is, this little word there is what the issue is. Okay, because now what does there refer to? In choice C, what does there refer to? A few experts. Absolutely right. So now what choice C is telling me is that both the claims are by these few experts. Okay, that is why this sentence is wrong. It's basically there refers to the few experts, not just the experts, the few experts. This group over here. While a few experts claim that church coined the date, blah, 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 their more prevalent belief is these people, this set of people who claim that church coined the date because of the ulterior motive, these people, their more prevalent belief is that Feb 14th is celebrated as Valentine's Day to honor the death. Okay, so that is why this choice is wrong. So again, grammatically, this choice is not wrong at all. But meaning-wise, this choice doesn't communicate the meaning. Aspect number 3. Now, if we go back to to which aspect of the sentence you were not able to get. Remember, aspect number 3 was what majority of you were not able to get. And that is what led you to select choice C as the correct answer. Okay. Any comments about this? This should be a very, very big revelation for you. How step number 1, a misstep there, leads to issue with step number 3. And this again boils down to how is it that you should be solving questions as you are learning the method. So I want to hear from you before I go further. And I'll talk about the correct choice as well. Correct choice is choice E, by the way. But tell me, what do you think about this? What purpose does while have in choice C? It is presenting a contrast here. How to manage time with meaning and error checking. Okay, I'll talk about that as well. The amount of writing and analysis to do here would take more than 90 seconds. In the learning phase, definitely that is going to take time. Okay, that's why I'm saying in the learning phase, I want you to keep the watch away, keep your clock away, no timer at all when you're learning the process. But as you learn the process, as you solve 20, 30, 40 questions in the application files, in the practice files, utilizing this method, by the time you finish the course, you will be able to solve questions in the timed environment as well. Okay, and I'm going to talk about this in further detail after I finish off this question. Okay, now, okay, so again, if you don't completely understand the meaning of the original choice, you will not be able to solve such questions correctly. Okay, you will end up wasting time looking through the answer choices. Okay. Now, choice D is wrong. Why? Because, again, as claimed by few experts, it's not very clear what it modifies. The other thing is the more prevalent belief, it's not very clear what it modifies here. Okay, that's why choice D is wrong. Choice E is the correct choice here. And the reason why you would have rejected choice E, and I'll talk about this part as well, is because you would have felt that it doesn't have the right structure. How many of you rejected choice E because you felt that the sentence structure was a bit odd? That the church coined the date, blah, blah, blah. It just seems like a weird sentence structure. That's why you rejected choice E. Okay, so I'll elaborate on that part as well. Okay, but choice E is the correct answer choice. Okay, so again, if you want to score that 90th percentile, you need to be able to solve such questions correctly, and for that you need to master this method. Okay, now how is it that you should effectively master this method? And that's where the detailed solutions help you. Okay, so what you need to do is, after you solve a question and after you review it, after you solve the question, you need to review the solution and you need to answer these questions. Okay. And what we call this is a strategic review. Essentially, you have to ask yourself, when you review after you've done reviewing the solution, you have to ask yourself, did I understand all the aspects of the meaning? All the aspects of the meaning. Okay, not just the gist of the sentence, not just 70% of the sentence, all the aspects of the meaning. Because remember, just because you didn't get aspect number 3, you answered this question incorrectly. Okay, and that's the nature of most of the difficult SC questions. Okay, so that's the first question you need to answer. The second question that you need to answer is, why did you reject the correct choice? Remember, I asked you the question, did you find most of you rejected choice E because you felt that the sentence structure was odd. Okay, and that's the question that you need to answer. Why did I reject the correct choice? Okay, was it because I didn't understand some grammatical rule, or was it that the sentence structure was weird? What was it? Okay. Secondly, the third question that you need to answer is, why did you select an incorrect choice? In this case, was it because there was this meaning issue that you weren't able to spot, or was it there's some grammatical rule that you misunderstood and you misapplied? Okay, so again, those are the questions. These are the questions that I want you to answer after reviewing each and every question, after reviewing each and every detailed solution of the question that you solve. And this is what we call as strategic review. So there's strategic pausing method to read and understand the meaning of the sentence. Then there's strategic review to get that feedback
so that you can implement that feedback for the rest of the questions that you attempt. And this needs to be a constant effort. It shouldn't be that, okay, I'm going to solve these 20 questions and then the next 2 questions I'm going to do strategic review. No, you need to do strategic review for all the questions, especially when you are in the learning phase. When you get to the refinement phase, in that phase you can decide which questions you do strategic review for, and we guide you for that as well. Okay. Alright, so what we're going to do now is you're going to do strategic review of your attempt. Now, why did you reject the correct answer choice? There could be these 2 issues. Unfamiliar sentence structure, that subject verb, or misconception that always has to be used even when it is used. That always has to be used, misconception, okay, over here. Prevalent belief is that over here. That some of you may have thought that, okay, you need to use that over here. But the more prevalent belief is that it is celebrated on this date, right? So it could be, so both of the issues are with the usage of that. So when you figure this out, what you need to do is you need to understand that, okay, you need to make a note of this sentence structure. This is the unfamiliar sentence structure. Most of you rejected the choice because of this reason. So you just make a note of that in your notes that, okay, I need to be conscious about such sentence structures. These are correct. I shouldn't really reject answer choices just based on this unfamiliar sentence structure. So again, each and every question, each and every choice becomes that learning opportunity for you. Okay. All right. And again, your solution needs to provide that information. It should not just say this is correct. It should also say it's correct. Why? And it should elaborate on the doubts that you may have. And that's why the solutions that we have in our course, as well as in Scholaranium, as well as in our mock test, are so very detailed so that you can do that strategic review as you are reviewing the solutions. Okay. The second thing is, why did you select the incorrect answer choice as the correct answer? Okay. For that, you have to, you again look at the solution. In question, if you selected choice A, this means that you failed to observe the sentence structure issue. If you selected any of these 3 answer choices, B, C, and D, you fail to observe the meaning distortion. In each of these choices, there is meaning distortion. And because majority of you selected choice C, you basically weren't able to figure out aspect number 3. That was the reason. Okay. So you have to look at the solution so that you can understand which step of the process did you falter in while you were solving the question. Okay. And again, such analysis is not possible if you have very brief solutions. Okay, you need to have detailed solutions. And what I'm going to show you is, this is an actual Scholaranium question. This is the level of detail of the solution, and these are all screenshots. Okay, you see that sentence structure has been detailed out, and then all the meanings, all the aspects of the meaning have been specified over here. Then you have error analysis in detail. These are sentence structure errors, right? And then you have each and every answer choice. And again, this is not meant for you to read. Again, I'm just showing you the level of detail of answer choices, of the solution of why each answer choice is wrong. Now, when you have such detailed solutions, you will be able to answer all these questions for each and every question that you solve. Okay. All right. Now, to efficiently master the method, so what we talked about are the detailed solutions, right? So whatever source you're using, you need to ask, you need to identify, do you have such detailed solutions that are based on the method that you need to solve? Okay, and meaning-based method is the only method that works. Okay. Now, the second part over here, which we're going to talk about, is how do you efficiently master this method? Okay, as I said, you need to get that feedback, right? And how should you react to that feedback? So first, what I'm going to tell you is, when is it that you need to learn the method? Now, most of the students, what they do is they go through all the concepts. Okay, if you think about it, sentence correction has subject-verb concepts, verb concepts, pronouns, modifiers, parallelism, comparison, and then idioms as well, right? And this is the increasing difficulty level of concepts. You definitely need to know subject-verb concepts before you even worry about verb tenses. Likewise, you need to have a solid understanding of subject-verb pronouns before you go into the details of what are verb ing modifiers, verb ed modifiers, and whatnot, right? Now, modifiers and parallelism, I would say you need to first know modifiers, and then parallelism comes out very naturally, and then comparison is the last one. So this is the increasing difficulty level of concepts in sentence correction. And again, sentence correction is the only section in verbal that has a number of concepts. Critical reasoning, very few concepts. RC, even fewer concepts. Okay. Now, most of students, what they do is they learn the concepts, they learn the rules pertaining to each and every concept, and then they basically start practicing questions, full-length questions. And when they do that, they've actually missed out a lot of learning opportunities. And they get that overburden. They feel that, oh my goodness, what concept do I apply here? Do I apply parallelism concept? Do I apply modifier concept? What do I do, right? So that is the negative of learning application after learning all the concepts, okay? Instead, what you need to do is you need to learn application right when you're learning the concepts. And that's what we have done at e-GMAT. We have inserted these duos of application and practice files. And why are these required in pairs? Because in the application file, we take 4 to 5 questions and we give you guided practice. The manner in which I solved this question today in front of you, you will see that same intensity, that same detail of solution, that same that same detailed method utilized for each and every question in the application file in a guided manner, right? Once you solve those 4 to 5 questions in the application file, you then practice on your own using the practice file. So right there and then, and these 10 questions, or I would say these 8 to 10 questions that are there in these application and practice files, they are purpose built. You don't have any random selection of questions here. The questions in subject verb block will only be questions that have subject verb errors primarily. You're not going to have any nuanced pronoun errors or any nuanced parallelism error in the application and practice files here. Likewise, when you get to verbs, when you get to the application and practice files in verbs, you're going to have questions that are only testing you on subject, verb, and verbs. You're not going to have any nuanced errors in modifiers or parallelism or comparison, right? And so on and so forth. Now, what that helps to do is, as you're learning the concepts, you're also learning how to apply those concepts. So when you get to this point here, when you get to comparison questions, all of this seems to be coming very naturally to you because you have not only learned the concepts, you've also learned how to apply them. Okay, and that is the benefit of learning application inbuilt as you're learning the concepts. Okay, that is the benefit of learning application through these purpose-built files and not just random selection of questions. Many a times what students do is they go to these forums or they have these long PDFs of questions which are, okay, these are modifier questions, these are parallelism questions, these are difficult, these are easy, but again, they solve all those questions and these are not really the best collated questions. These may be good questions, these may be from official sources, but are you ready to be able to solve those 700 level questions of modifiers if you are just learning subject verb? No, you're not, right? So that is, you need to have a good curated question bank, and that is what you get with the application and practice files in the e-GMAT course, because when you are doing subject verb, you just need to be able to solve subject verb questions, not any other type of questions. Okay. Now, the 23 feedback points that Rajat talked about, those are the feedback points that you get from these application and practice files. Those feedback points tell you that, okay, yes, you are able to solve subject verb questions correctly, but you are not able to solve verbs questions correctly, right? Verbs complete SC questions. When you get that feedback, you then implement that feedback, you implement the corrective actions accordingly, okay? But the other thing that I want to bring to your attention is, by the time you finish the course, what happens, because you're learning this along the way, your ability is improving as you are moving from one application to another. As you finish the course, you get to that 70th percentile. Okay, and somebody had asked me that, okay, how will I be able to do this in the timed environment? This is how you will be able to do. In the beginning, you will take more time. If I were to plot the timing plot, it'll go somewhere like this. Okay, in the beginning, you will take a lot of time. I am telling you that. Don't expect magic to happen. Don't expect that, okay, I'm going to now apply meaning-based approach and I'm going to be able to solve questions in 90 seconds. No, that is not going to happen. In the beginning, you are going to take a lot of time. But then as you get more comfortable, as you go through the master comprehension course, as you solve these application files, by the time you get to model, I would say by the time you get to parallelism, your time to answer questions will have gotten down. Okay. But another thing to notice is that as you are going from one application file to another, you're also adding that layer of complexity. You're adding more concepts in the bag, right? So again, you have to give your mind time to get adjusted to those concepts, right? So again, don't expect miracles to happen, but definitely by the time you finish the course, your time to answer questions will have come down if you're doing the course the right way, if you're implementing the feedback the right way, and your ability will definitely be at 70th percentile level at least. Okay, and then you move on to Scholaranium to further refine your ability, improve your ability to that 90th percentile. Okay, does this make sense? Any questions about this before I go further? Okay, now as you are doing the application files, I want you to make sure that you are asking yourself, am I learning all the steps properly? Or am I struggling with some aspects of the method, right? You need to ask yourself those questions. And that is where, as I said, you get feedback for application 23 times. Likewise, in critical reasoning course, you get that similar feedback 39 times. Okay. Now, I'm going to take a look at SC dashboard of Sahil. He scored a V38, and I'm going to show you what I mean by incorporating feedback. Now, if you take a look at his dashboard, this is module number 2, subject verb. He's way early in the process. If you take a look at his score here, subject verb makes sense, 60%. Subject verb agree number, he's doing very well. Which means this 100% tells me that he's able to solve questions correctly, right? Correctly pertaining to subject verb agree number. But when I take a look at subject verb makes sense and he gets a 60%, that's a feedback to him that, okay, he's not able to figure out when subject verb do not make sense together. Right? So there is that corrective action that is required from his end. Now when it comes to the application file, that same thing continues on over here. He's getting questions wrong in the application file because he's not able to apply those, he's not able to get the meaning aspect of it, right? But what he does over here is, you take a look at the amount of time that he's spent, even though he's gotten 60%, but he actually went back and he redid quite a few questions. That's why the amount of time he spent about 10 minutes per question. Okay, so he actually spent quite a lot of time as he was answering questions incorrectly. He actually did spend quite a lot of time in reviewing his mistakes, and the result of that review is that he gets 100% in the practice file. And again, the difficulty level of questions between these two files is not really very different. It is the similar difficulty level. Okay, so because he's reviewing his mistakes here, he is able to implement those corrective actions on the subject verb practice file. Okay. Now, let's see similar thing for verbs. Verb tenses 1, he scores poorly, but he spends good time. Okay. Now again, I need to take a look at both of these metrics, the 67% and the 46 minutes that he spent, to figure out, is he taking the feedback seriously? If he's taking the feedback seriously, he should either have a higher score here, or he should be spending more time. And I see that he's spending more time, right? Which means that he has gone back and he's reviewed his mistakes. Okay. Now, let's take a look at verb sequencing. Now over here you see that he spent 64 minutes. Now you might question, if he got 83%, why did he spend that? And these are all 10 to 15 minute long files. Each of these files have very limited set of concepts that we are teaching you. Okay, because that's what we want to do. The course is so modular. In verb tenses 1, you don't go through perfect tenses, you go through simple tenses and continuous tenses. In verb tenses too, you learn about perfect tenses because perfect tenses require a high level of understanding, right? In verb sequences, now you put all the verb tenses together and you learn about verb sequencing. So when I take a look at these scores here, the feedback tells the student that, okay, he's doing well in perfect tenses. He's gotten 100% score over here. He's doing well in verb tenses 1 also because he did improve by spending more time on it. The verb sequencing, he scored 83% after a couple of attempts. And how do I know that he spent a couple of attempts? Because he spent more than an hour on this file, and this is a 10-minute long file. So again, when students ask me how long will I take to do the course, it really depends on you, how well you're able to absorb the content. Okay, if you are getting the whole point, you shouldn't be going through the course just to do check boxes. No, you have to understand the content that's there and you getting the feedback so that you can implement that feedback right there and then. Now, if Sahil had ignored the 67% and moved on, he wouldn't have been able to score that high in his application file, right? He wouldn't have been able to score that high in his OG quizzes, right? The whole point, the whole reason why he's able to score well is because he spent that level of effort, that amount of effort in order to solve questions, okay? Does it help you to understand? Do you understand how to implement feedback? I sometimes go through a file multiple times to validate my understanding, so these percentages are quite skewed. And you're right, absolutely right. And that's why I'm saying that when I'm taking a look at 67%, that doesn't necessarily tell me that the student hasn't spent, that the student is not good in verb tenses 1, because I can see that he spent the effort. But when I see dashboards where I see 67% but only 9 minutes spent, that's an indication to you that, okay, and to me, that this student is not taking the feedback seriously. So thank you for bringing that up. You're absolutely right. And again, that's what I mean by getting the feedback and implementing corrective actions. Okay. Should I study quant and verbal simultaneously, or should I finish one section and move to the next? You should finish one section and then move to the next. Okay. Now, so that's what I would say. Okay. All right. So now let's go further over here. Now, apart from getting the feedback from your dashboard, you also, from the course dashboard, you also get feedback from the further question attempts. And look at the student, Sahil. If I take a look at this thing over here, he got 2 questions wrong and he bookmarked those questions. Those are signs that he's taking this corrective action very seriously. He's taking this feedback on a question level very seriously when he's bookmarked the question so that he can come and review this question and the detailed solution later on. Okay? So again, those are things that I want you to start doing. I want you to make sure that you are first learning the methods, you're focusing on learning the methods, and you are doing that efficiently by taking your feedback seriously. And don't just go through the content just to check the boxes. Go through the content with the intent to learning the content, with the intent to completely mastering the content. Okay, and I'll give you an example. Sometimes, you may take a book, you want to read it from cover to cover, and it's a business book, you want to read it from cover to cover, but you cannot just go by the pace of, let's say, your colleague reading that book or your friend reading that book. Okay, on a particular page, you may spend an hour reading that page if it is that dense and if you need to think about it, right? So again, the manner in which the same way that we can't say that if my friend took a week to read that book, I'll also take a week. That's not really equivalent, right? Because I may take a month to absorb that book. I may take I may take 200 hours to absorb that book, whereas my friend could take only 80 hours to absorb that book, right? So again, you have to understand that distinction very clearly, all right? Now, this is Sahil's quote from his debrief. For me, the biggest thing regarding SC was the application of concepts. My concepts were not bad in attempts 1 and 2, but I lacked the knowledge of application of the same. After that, the application of concepts plays a game-changing role, right? So again, very, very important. Now, what I said that by going through the course, you can go from 70th, you can go from your starting ability to 70th percentile. But how do you go from that 70th to 90th percentile? For that, you need to cement the methods. Okay. Now, what I'm going to show you is how Rohit Malan reached that 90th percentile in SC, and he got a V41 with the 90th percentile in SC. Okay. Now, what he did was he scored an average of 90% in all the application files. Only in one of the 23 files, his score was below 70%. Okay. Now, this shows that he went through the course in the right manner. Okay. So, because he went through the course in the right manner, when he started off his cementing, he didn't really need to solve a whole lot number of questions to get to that 90th percentile. If you take a look at it, he took an easy quiz. He got 20 out of 21 questions correctly. That was a no-brainer for him. Medium quiz, 25 out of 33 questions correctly, right? Hard quiz, again, he had more than 80% score in each of these files, right? So that just indicates that you don't, overall, he solved only 80 questions in the cementing phase. He didn't really need to solve all the 300 or all the 400 questions that are there in the system for him. Okay, he just needed to solve those 80 questions and he was able to achieve that 90th percentile. Okay, and that's the beauty of doing the course the right manner. Rohit had a great launch pad. Why did he have a great launch pad? Because he did the course the right way. And with the right method, he didn't really need to solve hundreds of questions to get to that 90th percentile. That's the power of data. That's the power of method and the power of data. And you need to utilize both so that you can get to that score that you need to. Okay. Now, this is what Rohit says. Your e-GMAT course is effective not just because we make impactful video lessons. It is effective because it gives you the insights on areas where you need to improve upon and provides the tools that help you personalize your journey to that 730 score. Okay. So, again, I'm going to reiterate what Rajat already talked about. Score 730 plus to secure admission to top B schools and earn that scholarship. Very important. You need to know why is it that you need to put in that level of effort. Okay. GMAT is a very logical exam. It's a beautifully constructed exam. If you focus on the right things, preparing for GMAT should be a good experience. It should not be that laborious experience. It should not be that experience that brings you down. Okay, but you have to focus on the right things. It's a test of ability. Okay, to ace GMAT, you need to build ability. Get your personalized study plan to make sure that you're focusing on the right areas, right? And go through these 4 stages of learning. Learn the concepts right, learn the methods. Again, these 3 happen in the course. When you're learning the concepts, you learn the methods, you perfect the methods right there and then you refine further utilizing Scholarium, and then you maintain as you go through the other sections. Okay, so again, get the feedback, utilize the feedback in the right manner. Okay, so again, if you have any questions, write to us either at rajat@e-gmat.com or at payal@e-gmat.com, and we'll help you figure out how is it that you can get to your score. Okay, all right, so with this, we have come to the end of this session. And I can take questions now. How do I get the baseline score if I join e-GMAT? If this is your first attempt, then definitely take SigmaX mock to get your baseline score. If this is your second attempt or multiple attempts, then definitely get your last ESR to get your baseline scores. Okay? All right. I'm going to share the session file now. Here's the session PDF. And I'd like you to give your rating for the session and tell us what you learned from this session. Again, we conduct these sessions every weekend, so if you can give your detailed feedback, I'd really appreciate that. All right. Q38, V35, 600 score, what do you suggest for me? Alfonso, I would suggest that you create your personalized study plan, and if you are not as yet an e-GMAT student, then schedule a session with us. So definitely we can help you create your personalized study plan. For you, I would say you should, start off with verbal. Verbal is definitely your stronger section. So definitely start off with verbal, get to that verbal score of V41, V42, even V44 if you can. Definitely you should be able to if you're focusing on the methods there. And Q38, you should be able to get to Q48 easily. Okay, again, apply the same methods, definitely. Okay, so yeah. I have a question here. Are the Sigma X marks in GMAT club test included in the e-GMAT verbal course? Yes, they are. So in the solution, there is no way to just see the question without the solution. It helps addressing a question again before seeing the question. Otherwise, one has to go through the complete test again to get to the question alone. Okay, we can take that feedback, definitely. So Prem, if you can send us an email with that feedback, I would really appreciate that. Now you can actually replay the quiz. You can when you're solving the question. So here's what I would suggest. When you take the quiz, you can bookmark the question, okay, and then you can take a quiz of only the bookmark questions. And that way, you can review, let's say, 4 to 5 questions together, right? So you can do that. Can we get this video to rewatch? Yes, we will be sharing. The PDF, the recording link with you in a bit, and then you should be able to watch this video again. You guys spend a lot of emphasis of your SC course, but not others. Well, Ata, I don't know why you have that impression. We have these. Each of our courses are equally impactful. We conduct these live webinars to talk about each and every course. So definitely attend our CR webinar, our RC webinar. Then we have number properties and algebra webinar as well. So definitely look at that. But if you feel that way, please give me some more information. But there's nothing like SC course is any better than any other courses. All the courses are based on the same principles. They are developed on the same principles. So yeah. All right. Okay, so I think that's it. There's one comment over here. If I do not get a good score in the Scholarinium ability quiz, should I revisit the entire concept? Again, Scholarinium ability quiz, you have to then take a look at, if you're taking ability quiz, my guess is that you have already gone through the course. So again, take a look at the details of that particular quiz. Figure out what kind of questions are you making mistakes in, and then you basically go back to the course and look at the particular concepts pertaining to the questions that you're making mistakes in. Okay. Another thing that I would recommend is we have this detailed strategic review that we want you to do on quant questions. So definitely do that as well. Quant questions or verbal questions. So again, do that strategic review. And we can share, so write to us so that we can share the links of those, how to do strategic review for SC questions, CR questions, and so on and so forth, so that you can start doing that, and then you figure out where you need to improve upon. Okay. All right. How to buy our course? Just go to e-GMAT.com, buy page, and then you should be able to buy the course. Does the e-GMAT student get frequent one-to-one session from you or faculty at e-GMAT, or is it based on automated study through your system? It's based on automated study through our system. It's not possible. We are perfecting our systems every day so that we can give you feedback that you need through the system itself, and that's what enables us to provide that private tutor type experience, or even better than private tutor type experience, through our technology platform. We have a dedicated 7-person technology team who's every day enhancing our technology platform so that we can give you the right feedback. Okay, and that's why we can definitely tell you that you will get a better feedback from the system than you would get from a private tutor. Okay, so yeah, you get the system, you get the feedback through the automated system. Now, if you have questions with regards to how is it that you are stuck with a certain thing, then definitely you write to us, and we have a dedicated strategy team which will respond to you. Yes, definitely. If you need assistance on any manner, we definitely respond to you, to your emails through our GMAT strategy team. Okay. All right. So thank you very much. This was really a wonderful start to the new year, and I wish you all the very best for your preparation. And let us know how we can help you get to your target GMAT score. We definitely take product improvement feedbacks. If you've already shared your feedback on support, if you can you send me an email once again, so that I'm not going to ask you to share your email over here, but just send me another email, and we'll to which ID, payal@e-GMAT.com. Okay, and do reference this webinar so that I can put things into context. Okay. In fact, one of the feedback which was just provided, that there's no way to see a question without the solution. This is a feedback which was recently provided to us, and we are in the process of implementing feedback. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, and good luck for your GMAT preparation, and let us know how we can help you. Bye-bye.